Hello all. Just going to do a little short Pygame tutorial to get you all kickstarted on, creating your own graphics projects using Pygame. So we've gone through the setup. You should have Pygame installed and everything up and running, and we can test that real quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new project here. Make a PyDev project. We'll call it Pygame tutorial. Make sure I have my interpreter and all that set up as I've shown in previous videos. And then within this class, I'm just going to go ahead and make a PyDev module right here. Now, you could put stuff in packages, but I won't for now. We'll name this one, I don't know, basic shapes, because we're going to just spend some time drawing some basic shapes here. Template I'll use is the empty one. It just gives me the comments of date and author. And as I said, we can test pretty quickly if our Pygame is working simply by typing import Pygame. And if you see it autocomplete come up, then you're probably good. Now we're going to shorten this import Pygame as P. This is simply to give us a variable that we can use instead of typing Pygame each time. Now we can just type P whenever we want to use it, something that's in the Pygame library. Okay. Simply running our code right now just to make sure, and you should see a message pop up here, the console, just letting you know that, hey, it's installed and it's working well. So when you're creating a Pygame project, one of the things that you need is a window, a display. And so Pygame starts with a call to its init function. And this just calls all the initial module setup that is needed to make Pygame run. And then what I like to do next is save the screen as a variable. And actually, let's go ahead and put all this into a method here. So let's put this into a main function. We'll call main down here like we normally do. Okay. So we call p.init to initialize everything. And actually, a better name for this would probably be setup. Okay. And then we're going to have a variable called screen, which is going to be our window. And we'll call the .display .set mode. And set mode takes a resolution that we want. So let's say that we want to make a 600 by 600 window. Then I would type in, give it the tuple 600, 600. Notice the double set of parentheses here. That's necessary because it's actually taking in a tuple here, not two different numbers. So if you're missing that set of parentheses, when you'll run it, you'll notice that you get this error that says argument 1 must be 2 item sequence, not an int. So it needs to group these two together. So we'll do that right there. Okay, and so now that we have a window displayed, we can show, and it actually pops up for just a second. You can see when I run it, it'll pop the window up for just 1 second. You can see here, and then it's gone. Right. And so this happens because we are Python's finishing the setup call. It's getting to the end of the method, and then it's exiting the program. So nothing else is happening here. We're not telling it to stay open. We're not telling it to continue here, right? A couple other useful things. Well, we'll get to the clock in a little bit. So let's go ahead and work with this with another setup. So that'll be our setup. Another function will be our main. So this will be when we actually do some of the drawing. And we'll go ahead and call that after. And our main function will have a while loop that we'll just say while not done. And so I'm going to set done to be false. And while not done, I'm going to go ahead and just put in a command here, screen.fill, which will give the screen a certain color. So we'll give it the color of black here. Now you'll notice that because I don't have screen within the main method, right? It's only defined within setup. This is a good time to make it a global variable. So we'll make that screen a global variable so we can access it down below here. Okay, so now we can see actually that if we run it, you actually see the window will pop up and it will stay popped up, but it actually freezes, right? So you'll get the window is not responding. If you click on the X, it'll say, close the program, Python's not responding. You can wait for the program to respond, but it won't. We're basically stuck in an infinite while loop. So you can hit this little red stop button in Eclipse, and that'll actually close out the window itself. Okay. The reason that just happened is actually we have this loop that says while not done fill, screen.fill. And so what it's continuously doing is executing the screen.fill method as fast as possible. So it's essentially, maxing out the CPU and nothing else is happening. Right? So we need to give it some other commands and we need to give it a timer. Right? So one of the things we want to set up in our setup method is a clock. Okay. This clock will be based on another Pygame class called time. And it will be a clock object here. So p.time.clock. We're building this object here. And just like we did for screen, we'll make this a global variable here. Okay. All right, so we'll have that clock variable there. And what we're going to go ahead and do with that in our main is just put in a tick call. So inside of our while loop at the very end, we want to add 2 lines of code. All right. Line number 1, just going to add some white space there. Line number 1 should be p.display.flip. Okay. So what this function does, p.display.flip, is redraws the display. So we want to have this anytime we want Pygame to update the display. We want to put in a call to display.flip. So once per cycle within my while loop, I'll update it. And so basically what this while loop is going to do is it's going to do something to the screen, it's going to update the display, and then it's going to repeat that. And the time it takes in order to do this is based on this clock variable. And so we have a call to clock.tick. And now we can set the frames per second. So we can say that we want it to basically, we want this method to max out at 30 frames per second, if you will. Right? And so we can, again, run our code and see if that fixed the problem. And you'll see that it's still spinning and still goes into not responding mode, right? So even though it's only updating 30 times per second, we still are getting that same problem we had before. Okay. And this is because we're not actually emptying this event cache that's happening. So every time when Pygame is started and it's executing through, there's an event queue that builds up. Okay. And so every time through your while loop, you need to basically go through these events and deal with them. Just empty it out. And we can do this with a simple for loop. So we can say for event in, and then it's p.event.get. Maybe I should use a different variable just so it's not confusing. Let's say for E standing for event. For event in p.event.get. So this grabs all of those event calls that are happening, things that so examples of events are mouse clicks, are key presses, and then other interactions with the buttons on the Pygame window. So the minimize, the restore, and the X out, right? And you actually see that this is the case, right? So if I, again, exit this out and try and run this thing, right, it won't even let me interact with these buttons here, right? Until it gets to non-responding, and then I can finally minimize it, right? So that's because this is handled in this loop here. So I'm going to uncomment that. For e an event, p.event.get. So this is a list of events, and we're going to go through each one at a time. And what we'll look at if the event.type, so if the type of this event is equal to certain factors. So one is p.quit, right? P.quit is what happens when you hit the red X, right? So we'll want to hit the red X. What I want to do is I want to say done equals true. When I hit the red X, I want to quit the application. Okay? So just adding that in right now, I now have a Pygame window, and you'll notice right away it's much more responsive to everything. Right, I can move it around the screen. It's not responding anymore, and then I can click the X, and that actually ends my program. You can see that happened there. Okay. Some other examples of events would be key presses or mouse presses. So I'll show you guys key presses in this video. Let's say that I just wanted to look at the up arrow key. All right. So if I say that event type is a key press, so in this case, key down, such as that, then what I can do is say I press a key, I can make it, I don't know, we'll have a color here. So let's make our shape that we're going to draw. I haven't drawn anything yet. So let's make our shape that we're going to draw. Let's make it change from blue to another color. So we can say is blue equals true. And then if I press a key down, is blue equals not is blue. I'm just going to switch it from true to false or false to true whenever I push any key down, right? All right. If I want this to be a particular key, then I can add what happens when a particular key is hit. So for example, if I say if that event, sorry, E, if the key that I push down is Pygame dot, and then there's a bunch of constants. So if you type in K, capital K, you'll see all the constants pop up here, right? So let's say that I wanted to do the down arrow. That would be K underscore and then down. All right. So now if I hit the down arrow, this will actually pop up what this variable is. Right. Now this variable will be either true or false, so we can actually look at that, maybe print it out and run our code here, and you'll see that it just keeps printing out true here, right? And when I push the down key, it changes to false. When I push the down key again, it changes to true. So I have a toggle, basically, toggling this variable between true and false. Okay. And so this is how you can put in code to interact with your methods, something like that. Okay. Now, let's make that variable a little bit more meaningful, right? Not just printing out the variable, but let's do something with that variable. Okay. So I want to show you guys just how to do some of the shapes that we're going to learn about. Okay. And so there's actually a whole bunch of different things we can use here, right? So there's a whole Pygame library that we can use that's pretty powerful, right? So I'll show you just one example, and then I'll show you the library that you can use in order to look up more stuff, right? So let's go ahead and say that I want to draw a rectangle. So I say pygame.draw. That's the draw class in here. And you'll notice that when I type in draw, I get a whole bunch of things that I can draw. So I can draw lines, I can draw an arc, circle, an ellipse, a polygon, and a rectangle. So a bunch of different things that I can use. And you can see the parameters on here are a surface, a color, and then most of the time it's a bounding box. So for a rectangle, that is the rectangle itself. For an ellipse, it's like the rectangle that goes through that that whole thing. Sorry, I realized that you guys couldn't see the box that was popping up here talking. So here you go: line, arc, circle, ellipse, polygon. You can see what pops up here. So let's do the rectangle one. Pygame.rectangle, put in our left parenthesis, and then we got to fill in the parameters here. Okay. So the surface is the surface that we're drawing on. And in this case, we could add other surfaces in, but right now we have one surface, and that is the Pygame screen. So we'll draw it on the screen. Okay. And then what we want to do is then add in some color. So we want the screen, we want a color, and then we want a bounding rectangle. Okay. And we'll call this we'll make it up above. We'll call this rectangle 1. Okay. All right. So those are the three things that everything needs, right? And so color and rectangle 1 are not defined, right? Undefined variables. So we're going to have to define those up above. All right. So let's start with colors. Colors in Pygame are very similar to other color classes that you've probably used. But you can actually, for a color, you can simply put the 3 numbers that represent the color itself. So let's say that I wanted blue. So I would have a 0 for my red component, a 0 for my green component, and then maybe like a darker-ish blue, so maybe like a 180 or something like that. These numbers can be between 0 and 255. And one of the things you can use to actually look at the colors, so if you go to go open up a browser and you search for something like color picker. I think I've showed this to my classes before. So let's say that I have something like this, right? Now I can, move around. Let's say I wanted to get this blue color right in here, like, I don't know, this color right here. Then I would use the values of 56, 82, and 186. And so I can switch back, and I can type in those values. So it's 56, 82, and then 186. Okay. And so that'll give me that nice blue color that I liked. Okay. So that's all I can do for colors, and you can get any color that you want. And there's also some built-in colors. Okay. The other thing you can do with this is now have the rectangle object. So we're going to use the variable rectangle1, and we'll use the Pygame class rectangle. Now this is a capital R because this is a rectangle object. It's a little bit different than drawing a rectangle. These rectangle objects have four values to them. They have a width, a height, an x and a y, a width and a height. So I have to define what those variables are. Now my window is a 600 by 600 window, and so wherever I draw my x and y, that's going to be the top left of the rectangle. So if I want this rectangle to start in the top left of my screen, then I can use 0, 0. If I want it to start with the top left corner in the middle of my screen, I can use 300, 300. And then I can give it a width and a height. Let's say that I want to make it a box that's 100, or let's say 50 by 50. So again, this is x, y, width, and height. And so what that'll do is that'll draw that rectangle in at that place. Right? Okay. And so now we again can run it, and you can see what happens. We get a blue circle show up, or a blue square show up with the middle point right here at 300, 300. Right, and it's a 100 by 100 or 50 by 50 box, right? And it's that blue color. Okay. And so let's say that I wanted to now use this key press, this variable is blue. I could just add in an if statement. I could say if is blue is true, then color is that. Else, I could say color equals, and then here I could maybe make a reddish type color. So maybe go a little bit higher in the red, a little bit lower in the blue and the green. I think that'll be red. It might be a little bit orange or purpley. And so let's see what happens now. So again, if I run it, you'll notice, it's blue, and then I click that down arrow because that was my key, and it switches to this orangey reddish type thing. So I can toggle between those by hitting the down arrow. Right? Because the down key, every time the down key is pressed, it gets added to this event queue. This event queue goes through and switches this variable on and off. All right, so we now have actually a key interaction with it. Right? So I can add any number of shapes to this. I could now add actually quite a lot of different shapes that I can add to this. I could move stuff around. I could do a lot of different stuff. So let me show you guys just maybe how to add a few different shapes with this. So rather than drawing just one rectangle, let's use a for loop to draw many rectangles. So I'm going to add a couple variables at the top here. So I'm going to just define my x, my y, my width, and my height. As I did in here, I'm just going to define them as variables up there, x, y, width, and height. Okay. So I'm going to replace my variables in here as x, y, width, and height. And you can guess what happens next. I'm going to use a for loop. So notice I tabbed in those two lines of code. I'm going to use a for loop here. Let's just say that I want to do 10. So for I in range 10, let's draw 10 different rectangles. But each one, I'm going to just offset by, I don't know, let's say half of the distance. So they're going to overlap by half. So I'll say x plus 25 and y plus 25. And then what I want to do is I want to multiply this value by I. That way, each time through, I'm adding 25 to x and 25 to y, and the rectangles are going to go downward and diagonally. So we can run it. Got a little bug here. Need to. That's weird. Maybe I have to put these on different lines. Yeah. And so you can see that, that's my first one, second one, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And each one interacts is at the halfway point, right? Okay. So again, using for loop within that, and we can switch the colors of each of these, right? We can change it from blue to red, again, using the same thing that I did before with that key down press. Okay, so it's just some very basics. You can draw rectangles. Let me show you guys just where to look to get started on the rest of them. So this video is getting a little bit long, so I want to wrap it up. So if we go into back into our browser here and go to pygame.org/docs. Okay. So this website will be your friend when you're trying to learn Pygame. It has all of the different classes that you can use. So they kind of have it broken down into useful stuff, advanced stuff, and then other. You will really want to stay, for the most part, you want to stay within this top row of classes and things like that. And there are a couple tutorials here, so you can look at some of the other built-in tutorials that they have to kind of help you out if you feel like you want a little bit more. But if you feel like you're ready to explore, you can just look at some of the classes. So let's look at just one of the classes we used, which was the draw class. And I keep saying class, but there are more modules in Python. So if I click on pygame.draw, I can see that that module has all of these different shapes. Draw a rectangle, draw a shape with any number of sides, draw a circle around a point, a shape inside a rectangle. So you can see and read about what all of them do here. And so then you can go down, okay, pygame.draw rectangle, and it tells you what you need in terms of parameters. You'll see there's this optional fourth parameter. Well, let's read what that does. It says the width argument is the thickness to draw the outer edge. If width is 0, then the rectangle will be filled. Okay, so it looks like if we just actually add in this parameter here, width equals something, and set an example, we can actually make a our rectangle have like an edge versus being filled in. So let's actually try that out. Okay. And so if I add in, to my rectangle, let's say I want to add in an edge of 10. And now you'll see what it does is it adds in, so every rectangle I'm drawing actually has a pixel width of 10 as I draw it instead. Right, so that's pretty cool. All right, so back to our other window here. Let's see, what else are we gonna do? Circle. So circle takes a surface, that would be our screen, a color, and then it looks like a position and a radius. So again, the position argument is the center of the circle, the radius is the size. So if I wanted to draw a circle, I could just change around my code a little bit to be, instead of rectangle, I can change this to p.draw circle. And then I have to add one parameter in. I have to change, I'm not really adding in a rectangle here. I need to change this to a position and a radius. So the position will be the center of the circle. So that's where I can do my x plus 25 times I, and my y plus 25 times I. So there's my center position there. And I could have a radius of 25. And then I can do, the same optional width parameter there. And so now you'll see it actually draws circles instead of x's within this. And they can still change color. So you got a little chain link going on there. Right? And if I take that out, that optional parameter of 10, and you'll see it now, they're filled in circles. Okay. All right, so far so good. So again, you can read through, play around with these, read the documentations. If you're not sure what to do, you can look at examples of each of these. So let's see, like maybe I'm not sure what ellipse does, so I can search for examples. Oh, you have to sign into GitHub for some of them. It's like, but you can do that and look around. Here's another example that they passed in here. So it goes through some of the stuff that I went through and shows example of a bunch of the different codes being drawn and some comments for them. So you can take a look through those. All right, and then we can look at some other classes. So there's some dealing with the mouse. So if you want to look at how to use the mouse, get pressed, get position, get the amount of mouse movement, mouse cursor position, all these different things. There's a class for music. If you wanted to add in background music into your code, you can load in a music file for playback. You can start it, rewind it, loop it, all that good stuff. There is, if you wanted to look more into the display class, here's some of the behind the scenes. What does a init do? You can read about that if you're interested in that. You can look at the colors. So it does look like they have a built-in color class that uses naming representation. So you can use that as well. Images, you wanted to add in images to your drawing. There's a section on fonts as well. So there's really a lot in within this. You can look at some of the advanced stuff if you're feeling brave, but there's a lot of examples of people who've already done a lot of stuff with Pygame, and we're going to be working with this a lot this upcoming semester. So we'll be exploring all this stuff, but this should give you a good jumping off point. Okay, so feel free to browse around this website. So that'll wrap it up for me. Yeah, I hope this video was helpful.